Okay, well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the meeting of Tayside Contracts Joint Committee. I'd like to remind the Joint Committee at this stage that the public part of the meeting is being recorded and will be placed on Tayside Contracts website for public viewing. Members should keep microphones on mute, please, throughout the meeting unless they are speaking. I now ask the clerk, Mr. Waddle, to take us through the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rome. I'll take you through the agenda today. I'll start by taking the roll call. So, Councillor Rome.
I'm here.
Bailey Roberts.
Good morning, I'm here.
Councillor Short.
I'm here, thank you.
Councillor Scullin.
Morning, I'm here.
Councillor Shears.
Morning, I'm here.
Councillor Duncan.
Here.
Councillor Durno.
Present.
Councillor Cowdy.
I'm here.
Councillor Bill Duff.
Present.
I've had apologies from Councillor Shepherd, so I believe Councillor Whiteside should be here.
I'm here.
Yeah. Councillor Fotheringham.
I'm here, good morning.
And Councillor Gregg. No. Councillor Cuthbert.
I'm here.
Councillor Lang.
Present.
Councillor McCall.
Present.
I've had apologies from Councillor Welch, so I believe Councillor Massey is here.
I'm here.
Yeah. I've had apologies from Councillor Forbes, so I believe Councillor John Duff is here.
Present.
Thank you. And Councillor Shires.
Present.
That completes the roll call. I'll
Thanks
take you
very
on
much.
to the second item. So are there any declarations of interest?
Anyone?
No. Okay. So item 3, we've got the minutes of the previous meetings of the 18th of November and the 27th of January submitted for approval.
Thank you very much. Are these minutes agreed? Thank you. I'll take that as agreement.
Great. So
The
we're on
next
to
item,
item. Thank you. On to item 4, workload report, and this is for noting.
So Buchan Strachan and John Curran will be speaking to this report. Buchan will speak to the facilities elements and John Curran will speak to the construction aspects. Keith, is there anything you'd like to say before I bring in Buchan?
Thanks, Convener. Good morning, councillors. I did note, Convener, sorry to jump back, but I think there was a comment from a councillor in the notes there in relation to the minute, quite possibly.
Oh, thank you very much, Keith. My apologies, Councillor Duncan. I didn't see that in the chat screen on. You've got a comment. Do you want to come in first, please?
Yeah, but after Keith, so I'm just noting my interest, as it were. But carry on, Keith. Thanks.
Thanks very much.
Okay, then, thanks very much. Yeah, workload report, in very brief summary, because I don't want to take away from any of the content from John or Buchan, who will go into the detail, but overall a very positive picture to report, evidenced by the majority of different sections being coded in green. If I may, Convener, at this time of year, if I can express my thanks to our winter maintenance colleagues who've worked all hours to keep our roads in Tayside safe, clear and snow and ice free during the winter months. Hopefully as we get into better weather, their need will be less, but it's very greatly appreciated. I'm sure the Joint Committee will share that sentiment. I'll pass back to yourself.
Thanks very much, Keith, for that reminder. I think it's important for everyone to remember that people are out, night and day doing this for us. Even if it doesn't seem like the weather is bad, things could be significantly worse if they weren't providing that service for us. So that's a useful reminder. I'll just pass back to yourself, please, Buchan. I'll bring in yourself, Councillor Duncan, before that, please.
Oh, right, no, I was sorry, I was jumping the gun perhaps, but no, I just wanted to make a comment basically on the good news as far as Dundee is concerned on pages 10 and 11 about the uptake in school meals. In particular, we're pleasing to see the quite significant uptake in the free school meals, both at primary and secondary level. So it was just really to say well done, and obviously Tayside Contracts is doing something right. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Councillor Duncan. I'm sure they'll be much appreciated by all the staff, and all members will be aware of all the work that's gone into the programme for different methods for boosting that uptake. So I'm sure we're seeing the fruits of that, and it's much appreciated. But Buchan, can you take over, please?
Thank you. Good morning.
So the report details the performance of the catering and FM units to the end of Q3 of the current financial year. In catering, we continued to see growth in school meal uptake. The position at the end of December 24 was 1.2% positive variance against budgeted meal numbers overall, which equates to around 46,000 meals. Primary meal numbers were behind budget overall, mostly due to the 10 school closure days in Perth and Kinross due to industrial action. Secondary meal numbers, however, were ahead of budget overall, as the impact was minimal for them because most secondaries remained open. Daily average meal uptake for the year is down by 0.2% compared to the same period in the previous year. Again, this was mainly due to the impact of the school closure days in Perth and Kinross. And had we provided the number of meals that we budgeted for, the daily average meal uptake would have been 1.4% ahead of this time last year. Free school meal uptake to the end of December was sitting at 64.3% of entitlement for primary schools and 49.6% for secondaries, both of which have increased compared to the same time last year. So overall, a really positive picture in terms of meal uptake. However, of course, there's always room for improvement, particularly around free school meal uptake. So we continue to promote school meals and their benefits. In terms of community meals, the service continued to operate successfully in Dundee, and the position at the end of Q3 was 1.5% behind budget. In the FM unit, school and non-school cleaning services were successfully delivered during the period. We also delivered full janitorial and school crossing patrol service during the period, with 14 vacant crossing points at the end of December. So that's a summary of the information featured in the Facilities Services Division part of the workload report, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, Abukin. I don't see any comments in the chat at this stage. Let me just pause just a few seconds for members if they have any. No, that's excellent. Thank you, Buchan. And we'll move on to the construction side and yourself, John.
Good morning, all. So I'll kick off with the Q3 workload position within the construction division. So all of the operational areas reported a busy programme of work throughout Q3 with no issues with the service delivery reported. Winter maintenance commitments commenced within Q3, and while it was a mild start to the season, temperatures did begin to drop within December, resulting in a significant increase in winter treatments. To date, while there's been an increase in treatments, winter hours across all areas is currently, winter 24-25 is currently the third mildest winter based on treatment hours out of the last 10, with 27,500 hours undertaken. This is roughly 6,000 hours behind the average of the last 10 years to date, and only 1,800 hours ahead of the mildest winter, which was 2021. Looking ahead to Q4 and Q1 of next financial year, all areas are reporting a positive workload position. However, with a slight caveat with this is the uncertainty over named schemes within the Angus operations area, with little specific scheme detail available to date and no seasonal surface dressing schemes currently confirmed. While there's been changes to funding positions which has affected anticipated workload, mostly this is a result of Scottish Government funding for active travel schemes being delayed, which is completely out with all of our hands here. Positively, cross-boundary working has ensured that all areas remain fully engaged throughout Q4, as confirmation of these external schemes is still awaited. All operational areas are reporting no concerns for the remainder of the winter season, with final restocking of de-icing material either completed or ongoing. And I'm happy to take any questions on the report or workload position, if there is any.
Thanks very much for that summary. I don't see any questions currently, but again, I'll just give it a little minute in case someone wants to ask something. Councillor Duff, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Really just to ask the question about Angus, that you seem to not have a work scheme plan from Angus. Is that presumably you've asked them there, John?
There's been the ask, there's been multiple meetings, work's ongoing with scheme design. So while we've got names, we don't have any information at this stage. And if you look through the various workload reports, that's a fairly consistent position that they always seem to be chasing their tail. So it's an ongoing project to try and ensure that information's coming through in a more timeous manner.
Okay, we'll maybe chase it up at our end. Just one other thing on Angus. We put additional money in the budget, or sometime during the year, in fact, for sort of gully cleaning, etc. I see from your report you've been doing some additional work there.
Yes.
Okay, that's good. Okay, we'll certainly chase up people at our end. Okay, thanks.
Thanks.
Take myself off mute. Thanks very much, Councillor Duff and Mr. Curran, for that answer. Any further comments on the construction report? No? Can this be agreed then, please? Thank you. I'll take that as agreement.
Thank you.
Next item, please.
Thank you. Item 5, schedule of agreed activities, and this is for approval.
Thank you. Keith, would you like to introduce this report, please?
Yeah, thank you, Convener. Yeah, this is a report which is born from a piece of work from joint working between Tayside Contracts and the 3 councils. The genesis of this work was from joint committee members may remember there was an independent assessment of Tayside Contracts back in 2023-24. And one of the items identified by the reviewer was that amongst councils, Tayside Contracts wasn't seen as in his words, an affiliate organisation of the councils. We've been working jointly with the councils in terms of analysing where effectively the uptake of Tayside Contract services have been. And you'll note from Appendix 2 in the report, there's quite a variety of uptake of Tayside Contracts by the 3 councils. We've been working closely with the 3 councils around dealing with this issue. We're not entirely sure why we've kind of got to where we've got to. There is a kind of working hypothesis that as there has been significant turnover of colleagues both within the councils and Tayside Contracts, previous associations and knowledge of each other's business and the content and effectively the obligations and indeed opportunities from the minute of agreement have possibly been lost. So we've been working to engage with our council colleagues again, reaffirm the Tayside Contracts as the shared service of the 3 councils. Part of that work is to have a new schedule of agreed activities. This is something which is set out in the minute of agreement, and having that schedule re-emphasised, redocumented, and then hopefully communicated subject to the Joint Committee's approval of the schedule, I think will also help strengthen and reaffirm the opportunity for shared working between Tayside Contracts and the 3 councils. It will also help us meet one of the targets in our business plan, which is looking to increase the amount of collaborative spend by 5%, which is £4 million, which helps the financial position of Tayside Contracts as set out in section 3.2 of this report. So we're looking for Joint Committee's approval in terms of the schedule of agreed activities, and then we can further communicate with our council colleagues, who I have to say have been extremely supportive in this reaffirmation of Tayside Contracts as an affiliate organisation of the Joint Committee. I'd welcome any questions, Convener.
Thanks very much, Keith, for that summary. I think it's really important, and it's really timely that we've done this review just to, again, just to look at the different processes that the councils have got for tendering services. And I think it's very helpful and points out the fact that different councils all do things slightly differently, and we can all consider our own processes for doing that in the most efficient and effective manner that benefits us collectively. Councillor Ling, I can see you've got a question, please.
Thanks, Stephen. Just, Keith, do you not think that also the world moved on since the Memorandum of Understanding was written, and that's possibly why some of the things are treated differently as we moved on from the Tayside region situation? So I was wondering if that was possibly some of it, rather than just a change of people. It's a change of ideas. It's a change of adapting to the new world that we live in. So I think just throwing that in, that might be some of the reason, and I don't know if you can agree to that or not. And the second one is, I just want confirmation that this is for approval today. This has no binding decision to be made that we will be moving towards changing the way that we operate at PKC, or in fact in Dundee or in Angus. Is this just an aspiration rather than a legal commitment to this?
Thanks. If I can take these Thank you. Can you take these questions one by one? Yeah. In terms of the world's moved on, I think that's a fair comment, Councillor Rain. It's very difficult to say why we've got to where we've got to, but I think the key thing is maybe not to focus on the past, but to focus on the future. What I would say in relation to your second point is none of the content of this report changes the agreement, the minute of agreement between the three councils.
Okay, thanks very much. Does that answer your question?
Well, it gives me a little bit of comfort that we're not being bound into something today on the decision that we have to move forward on this. I thought the legal, one of the vice conveners asked for legal comment on this and was told that it didn't, but just want confirmation of that.
Do you want to come back in, please, Keith?
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Maybe just to clarify that slightly further. The minute of agreement says that councils can delegate functions to Tayside contracts. So this report has no effect on that, other than helping to communicate and reaffirm the services that we provide. Effectively, it's a menu of services that Tayside contracts provides. The schedule of agreed activities is documented in the minute of agreement, i.e. the minute of agreement says there effectively should be a schedule of agreed activities, so we're meeting the terms of that. The minute of agreement also says that where a council is, say, going out to tender, for example, and it's a service that could be carried out under the existing agreement, i.e. the minute of agreement, then Tayside contracts should be part of that tender list. So again, that's been in the minute of agreement. This report today doesn't change that at all. That's why I was saying there is no change to the minute of agreement from this. It is basically just giving more detail in terms of the services that we provide.
Thank you for that, Keith. And I think, as I said previously, it's important that we reflect on the fact that all councils have the opportunity to tender works out and indeed to award work to Tayside contracts pre-tender. That doesn't mean that they have to do so, but they have an obligation under the minute of agreement to give Tayside contracts the opportunity to at least tender for works that they're putting out. I see that, Maureen, you want to come in, and then Councillor Cuthbert, please.
Just to reiterate what Keith has said, I've nothing further to add to the advice that has been given, but just to reiterate the position as far as the officers is concerned is that which Keith has narrated. Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Cuthbert, please.
Yeah, it's more of the same. Just to say I took legal advice on this and it doesn't affect the status quo, so it's business as usual as far as I can see.
Yeah, thank you. That was my understanding of it, is the status quo as set out in the minute of agreement. It's more of a refresher of what councils could be doing to do things more effectively. And as I say, I don't think it was aimed at any particular council. It highlights lots of areas where different councils do different practice differently, and how we could work more effectively by looking at all of our processes. Are there any further questions on this item? I don't see any comments or hands raised. No? Can this report be agreed then? Thank you.
Thanks. So we're on to item 6, Fleet Asset Management Plan 2025 to 2030, and this is submitted for approval.
Thank you very much. Keith, do you wish to introduce this report?
Thank you, Convener. Yes, I'm doing this in the absence of Dougie Mackay. Unfortunately, Dougie's not available for the meeting today. I'm joined by Bob Ritchie, who is our Transport Services Manager, and I've got to thank Bob and his team for pulling together this, in my opinion, very comprehensive and well-evidenced document together. The aim of this Fleet Asset Management Plan is to set out the approach to our strategic management of our vehicles and plant, of which we have just under 600 items, so it's quite a considerable fleet that we have. The key objectives are tackling climate change, reducing our emissions, making sure that we provide a financially sustainable and quality service, and also equally important is that we ensure that we are legally compliant, because the prospect of losing something like our operator's licence is a major risk for the organisation. The plan itself has been developed through engagement with a range of stakeholders. Dougie and Bob carried out 2 engagement sessions last year with joint committee members. I'm sure several members took part in that, and also liaison with our managers across all areas of Tayside contracts. So throw open for questions, Convener, between myself and Bob. Hopefully Bob can answer the technical ones that I can't answer. Thank you.
No, thanks very much, Keith, and I'm sure members will appreciate all the work that's gone into this. As you referenced, we've had workshops in the past, and we've been very interested in the subject. It's a very complicated and technical one, with all the additional burdens that have been placed recently. The issues in terms of supply chains, COVID, Brexit, etc., have really affected the ability to deliver services and indeed to get the vehicles and parts in that are needed. So it's been very difficult for you, and I'm sure our members appreciate that and enjoy the opportunity. I was about to say members such as Councillor McCall have asked questions like myself in the past on it, and I can see she wants to ask another one. So Councillor McCall, please.
Thank you very much. And I do appreciate the technicality of it all. I have a particular question around I suppose the asset management of vehicles as they move towards a more electric or away from the combustion engine, basically, because the maintenance and longevity of some of these types of vehicles is greater than the combustion engine style. So I'm just wondering what change, if any, has that made to the fleet asset management plan, particularly around the usage and the length of usage and disposal of vehicles. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor McCall. I think it's an excellent question. I don't know if you're okay to pass it over to Bob, Keith. Is that be appropriate?
I'm delighted to pass over to Bob, convener.
Good morning. We have adopted the approach that currently all the electric vehicles that have come onto the fleet have been small vans. We are watching as the heavier vehicles develop to decide which is the best route to go down. The electric vehicles that we have on the fleet currently, the majority are actually leased over a 4-year period. And the main reason for going down that route was because of the evolving technology and not knowing quite where it's all going to go. That technology is advancing at a rate of knots, and there is a risk that we would get caught with old vehicles where the asset value was virtually zero at the end of any sort of lengthy duration. So we've leased over 4-year periods. That's what we're currently doing.
Thanks, Bob. I don't know if that's exactly the question that Councillor McCall was asking. I don't know if you want to confirm, Councillor McCall.
Well, it kind of does, really, to some extent, Stephen, because they are longer, but depending on the usage as well, and very often the type of vehicle, well, not so much the small vans and things like that, because you tend to use them as normal as you would on the road, any other type of electric vehicle, but other types of vehicles that are becoming more more electrified, I suppose is the word, or battery operated. Very often the usage that they would use for the type of heavy plant that we have would not necessarily would not be known exactly how they would operate in that circumstances, because very often there's additional costs related that are not combustion engine specific related, but related to the operation of the battery vehicles. So I have a second question, if I may.
Please.
Could you maybe give us an overview of where you see the market progressing a bit more into electric vehicles for some of the heavier plant?
My view, for what it's worth, is that the EVs are unlikely to continue long term on the heavy vehicles. I think there are a number of issues around that, particularly given the nature of our operation, especially around about winter maintenance vehicles. If the weather is bad, a lot of snow on the ground, etc., and we're looking for long periods of operation, then I think electric vehicles would struggle given the charging times, etc. My view is that longer term, the HGVs will run on hydrogen, but that's an area that still to be fully developed. We did look in conjunction with Angus Council at introducing hydrogen RCVs, but that became too expensive, both in terms of the vehicles and in terms of the infrastructure for refueling. So I think the hydrogen has a wee bit to go before it becomes truly commercial.
Thank you, Bob. And is there any plans for some of perhaps the medium-sized plant rather than the heavy plant, maybe looking at hybrid, where they're self-charging?
Certainly we're looking at that. I think in the short term, it's probably totally EV that we will go down the route. We're certainly looking at that currently. On the medium panel vans, one of the drawbacks has been that the majority of those vehicle types are used for standby purposes, both with the workshops and in street lighting. And as a consequence, we would need home charging, and we don't have that facility currently. I need to
At
be
the
charged.
depot. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's why I was thinking of more the hybrid version.
Yeah, certainly
I
happy
mean,
to look at
I
that.
should declare that I drive a hybrid myself, and I find it's the best of both worlds because
Okay.
it self-charges as you drive along. So, and it is very low in fuel consumption.
Yeah.
So that that's maybe an option to consider. I totally, completely understand the charging challenges, perhaps of fully EV. Okay, well that's comforting to know, but thank you.
No, thanks very much, Councillor McCall. Thanks, Bob. And I think we're all aware of our obligations to consider the impacts on the climate, and we need to balance that off with our ability to provide services. So I think it may be in the short term that we focus on the things that we can do until that technology evolves. But I think it's important that as elected members we keep our eye on that, as we have been doing so. Councillor Short, I can see you've got a question as well, please.
Thank you. Just about got a flag of my life last week when I saw Bob. I thought that's some long-toothed apprentice if ever I saw it. If anybody's seen it on X, he was the face of the apprentice week for Tayside contracts. Today's slightly different. I've got a couple of quick questions. 87% of the fleet is low emission zone compliant, so presumably you would just avoid Dundee City Centre with the 13%. 23% that aren't compliant. And the second one is you've got an asset management practice section within it, and as far as I'm concerned, people are part of that asset. And I just wondered if you have, and Bob, you'll know this, it's very much part of the delivery at the moment, drugs and alcohol testing before people take to the vehicle. So is that something that you have in place operationally, and does that have to fit into some kind of report like this? Please.
Yeah, I think Leanne's probably the best one to answer that. But in short, yes, we do have a drug and alcohol policy, substance misuse policy, but it covers all employees, not just drivers.
Okay, thanks very much, Bob. Does that answer your question, Councillor Short?
Well, yeah, answers one of them. I take it the nodding of the head was the avoidance of Dundee.
No.
Yeah, thank you.
Bob, sorry, do you want to come in?
No, I was just going to say, if the substance misuse policies across Tayside contracts, the other element regarding the fleet and the low emission zones in Dundee, we put specific focus around allocation of vehicles. So whilst 87% of the fleet is LEZ compliant, the opportunities for vehicles from out with Dundee actually coming into Dundee are minimal. We have notices in the front of each of the vehicles to signify where it's non-LEZ compliant. So we hopefully can prevent any vehicles ending up inside the low emission zones.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Bob.
Okay.
That's a really helpful answer, and I'm glad to see we're considering such simple measures to try and avoid that. Leanne, please.
Hi, morning. I just wondered if Councillor Short was asking about the alcohol interlock system that is future legislation, I believe, or if you were just talking about the current position.
No, that was the one for the future, yeah.
Yeah. Again, Bob's probably more expert on that, but as I understand it, that legislation is not, well, we don't have a go live date for that yet, but it's something that we and other councils have got our eye on because it is future legislation, I believe.
Yeah, that's correct, Leanne. Some of the vehicles that are being supplied new currently have that facility, but it's basically as an add-on. So we're kind of waiting to see where it all goes.
Okay, thanks very much, both of you. I can see Councillor Short put hands up, so I think she's quite happy with that answer. I don't see any further comments on this item, so can this report be agreed, please? That's great, thank you.
Thank you. That takes us to item 7, external audit, annual audit plan, and this has been submitted for approval.
Thank you very much. I believe Diane Kidd will introduce this report. Diane, please.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to introduce this report. It's the external audit plan for 2024-25. We do have Stephen O'Hagan, who's the audit manager here, and I think he'll talk us through the audit risks, if that's okay.
Yes, please, Mr. O'Hagan, please.
Thanks. Yeah, I'll just be brief on this. This is year 3 of our audit. So the plan, for those who've been on the committee before, is fairly similar in nature to what you've seen before. It sets out the scope and the timing of the audit and outlines the audit work we'll be undertaking to address significant audit risks that have been identified through our planning work. As part of our planning work, we consider a range of issues, including any areas around fraud, suspected, alleged, actual fraud, etc. We make inquiries of management on this. We have also made inquiries of the convener as part of those processes. But in presenting the report to the committee, that's another opportunity for those charged with governance, should they have any issues, just to make you aware. We invite you to communicate those to us. Just either through this meeting or post meeting if there's anything in there. I should say as well, that's just part of a standard process that we're doing this. I'm not doing this for any particular reason. It's just part of our standard communications. So the plan sets out core components in there. It sets out the materiality we've set for the audit, which again is similar to previous years, and it identifies our significant risks. There's 2 significant risks for our audit work. The first one, management overrides. That's a risk in any audit. Auditing standards would require us to identify that, and also to identify what areas or what procedures we have to address that. The second risk that we've identified is around the estimation in pension liability. The pension liability calculations are derived by the actuarial work. And it's quite a very complex area, and it's quite a volatile area. And the work, Tayside's contracts input to that is fairly limited, to consideration of this, the reports from the actuary and any assumptions have been made in there. But because of the volatility and within that, it does present as a significant risk. There's a fairly standard set of audit procedures we will apply for that, and as I say, that's featured in previous years as well. So those are the 2 core risks around the financial statements. We also consider if there's any risks in relation to the wider scope work. So the Code of Audit Practice requires us in the public sector to consider wider areas. We look at financial management, financial sustainability. We consider vision, leadership and governance, and we also look at use of resources. In doing our planning work, we haven't identified any specific risks around those areas. However, we will comment when we get to our annual audit report, on our considerations and our judgments in that, along with our views around our best value conclusions in terms of how the Tayside contracts operate. In page 13 of the plan, we set out their details on reporting arrangements, timetable and fees. In simple terms, there's a timetable in there. We've scheduled to take the annual audit report to November committee. I appreciate that's what we scheduled last year, and we ran into some challenges in doing that. Our intention is to do it for the November committee this year. Just to make you aware that behind that, in terms of our actual sort of core on-site work, we've got some work coming up towards the end of this month into the start of April, working with colleagues looking at some of the control environment. We have our core field work planned for in September. However, in advance of that, we've been in discussion with Diane. We said we will liaise at the start of July on the accounts that are presented for audit, and we'll take a period of time there just to do some review of the accounts and the working papers, etc., so that we're clear on the information there, what we've got, if there's anything else we think we need to feed through, to give officers some time to make sure that that's available before we get into the core work in September. And that will give us plenty of time to present to the November committee. We mentioned the fees in there as well within that section. The audit fee, the expected audit fee is set centrally. We look at that, we consider the work that we're required to do and whether there's any variation required in that on the basis of our assessment of risk and assessment of additional work. We have set the fee at the expected fee range, at the expected fee that has been communicated. That's the £50,000 and £40. And that's reflective of our understanding of the control environment, the expectations, etc. And as we work through, that's what we'd expect to see. If we do need to make any variation to that, we will discuss that with management and communicate that with you. But that's our understanding just now on the basis of the arrangements in place for the finals. I'll stop at that. Quite happy to take any comments on the plan, any observations.
Thank you very much, Mr. O'Hagan, for that helpful summary of the audit plan. I can see I've got a couple of questions from members, starting with Councillor Cuthbert, please.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. O'Hagan, for your presentation. My question relates to the timing of the accounts coming to committee compared to when it's actually going to be submitted to yourselves. It looks like it comes to committee after it goes to you, and that seems a little bit odd. I'd have thought committee should see the accounts before they come to you for auditing.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Cuthbert. So the legislative requirements or the regulations require the accounts to be presented to the auditor by the 30th of June. So the unaudited accounts to the auditor by the 30th of June for audit. They also require the accounts to be presented for information, the unaudited accounts presented for information by the end of August to the relevant committee, this being the committee. I think it'd be fair to say that the norm in most organisations would be, the intention would be to prepare the accounts to take to a committee at some point late in June and then present them to the auditors after that. However, it's not a requirement. And I think based on the lead-in times, I think on the papers, I think from the discussion with officers, I think they've looked at this as an opportunity to make sure that the quality of the papers and the accounts that are presented for the auditor are brought up to date. And I think it's just quite a tight turnaround. And forgive me, Dan, I'm sure if you want to comment on this and put words in it, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but the lead-in for papers might mean that you're bringing a set of accounts that weren't quite complete to the committee, and therefore, August is actually the deadline that they're required to take. It may be in a position, that you have a set of accounts in time that you're finalised, you're happy with. That would obviously be for officers to do, but we've just acknowledged it in the discussions in the plan. It gives that bit of flexibility to officers, just depending on where they get to on those timeframes.
Thank you, Mr. O'Hagan. Diane, did you want to come back on that?
Just agree with Stephen, the accounts were always complete that came to committee, but the lead-in time is tight. We have to have papers done and complete by the start of June, whereas it gives us more weeks to check that qualitative side of the accounts, make sure the working papers are in agreement. So when they all go to audit on the 30th of June, we're in the best position.
Okay, thank you for that.
Okay. Councillor McCall, please.
Thank you. It's on the same point, actually. I mean, we have a joint committee on the 16th of June, which is only 2 weeks before the papers are to finally go to, for the deadline for papers to go to the auditors, I think by the 30th of June. And I think, Dan, you've just said that usually everything's ready by the beginning of June. So but you have to go through some final due diligence checking, which I completely understand is needed. However, the fact we should either consider our joint committee meeting in June to be perhaps closer to the 30th to allow it to come to the joint committee. And I don't see why that can't happen. Or it does come to the joint committee with the proviso that there is still some final due diligence checking to be done, but that is a certain percentage complete. But I totally agree with Councillor Cuthbert that I think it should really come before the joint committee so we could at least see what's there. So I would perhaps ask for consideration to be given to either moving the joint committee meeting in June from the 16th to perhaps closer to the 30th. It would only be 1 week, or we see what's available by the 16th and at least then the Joint Committee has an opportunity to have sight of it in advance. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor McCall. I can see a couple of members want to come in. Diane, I don't know if you want to come back on that first.
I think Robert's looking to come in. I don't know, as proper officer might be more appropriate.
Yeah, Councillor Duff, if you don't mind if I bring in Mr. Emmett in first on this topic. Thank you. Mr. Emmett.
Thank you, Convener. I think the audit has set out very clearly what the technical position is. I think it will be appropriate, given the comments that have been raised, for management to have a look at whether we can bring that back. I think the timing in the middle of June probably is tight for Diane and the team. I don't know if there's scope to look at the date of the meeting, but I would suggest if members are happy that we take that away and just have a look at how we can do that. I can understand the concerns, and there's a balance between the management response and actually making sure we get this in front of you as soon as we can. So if you're happy, we'll do just that.
I'd really appreciate that, Mr. Emmett. I mean, I have been involved in preparing accounts for audit, so I fully understand the challenges and the timelines and the things that can come up at the very last minute. So I don't underestimate the task that's facing you, because it is a quick turnaround. But I think Mr. Emmett's suggestion is very helpful. Thank you.
No, thanks again, Councillor McCall. Councillor Cuthbert, totally understand the viewpoint, and I think if there's a way to accommodate that by changing the meeting date, I think that we should look at that, obviously bearing in mind, as you say, the difficult variables and things may not be ready. So it may be something that gets penciled in, but Mr. Hagan's already confirmed that there isn't a legal requirement for it to come first, but obviously elected members would prefer that that was the case. So I'm sure we can look at that and see whether that's feasible nearer the time. Councillor Duff, please.
Thanks, Convener, and appreciate it's my first meeting of Tayside contracts, so please excuse me if I'm asking questions that others would know the answer to. It is still in relation to the accounts situation. I note, obviously, there is a statutory date for the approving the accounts of 30th of September, which the audit plan is not going to adhere to. Instead looking to complete it by the 17th of November. Just wonder, what are the implications for Tayside contracts of doing that, or are there any? And is there any, if we don't meet the November date, is there any kind of, I don't know, penalties or whatever that the Tayside contracts could find themselves in if they don't meet that date?
Thanks, Councillor Duff. Perfectly logical questions on my part, I would say. So thank you. Mr. O'Hagan?
Yeah, that's a fair question, and one that has come up previously and across a range of audits. We are still in a recovery position from the COVID. It's impacted across all audits, and to be honest, we'll be through our wider portfolio. We'll be through to the end of the 5-year appointment before I think we've caught up, as you would say, across these audits. In simple terms, there isn't fines or penalties. There is a requirement. There's a requirement to provide the accounts by the end of June on Tayside contracts. There's a requirement, or I think I've talked about this before. It's technically it talks about an aim. For the auditor seems to get a bit of an out on this. The auditors have to aim to sign the accounts by the end of September. But it then does lead on to there's a requirement in the legislation to produce the annual audit report and accounts and publish it on a website by the end of October. So that deadline won't be met, and I think it's just about disclosing it. But the reason it's not being met is not because of Tayside contracts, and we're quite clear in our reporting on that. It's because of the audit process, the timelines, and the resources available, you're not the only organisation in that environment. There are a number of local government bodies, including several councils, who are still in that position where the reporting is post-September and will be for another year or two.
Thank you, Mr. Hagan. Thanks, Councillor Duff, again for the question. Councillor McCall, you want to come back in, please?
Just really a follow-on question to that, Stephen, about your timetable for recovery, because it seems to have gone on. I know you've given some audit reports and you're back on track. So I was of the misinformed idea that everything was back on track, but it seems there's still some gaps. So maybe you can give us all an update on where you are with that and what the current delays are. Thank you.
Yeah, so I mean, I think in wider terms, organisationally, it's the capacity in managing through on audits where we've tried to bring forward audits across the board and look at the timetables on there where we've been making if we take local government sector, if we're making those end of September deadlines, we're obviously trying to continue to make those, and we're making improvements through, but it's incremental in some of these bodies. I think one of the particular challenges for Tayside contracts is to go back to pre-COVID, an August committee, and the lead into an August committee puts incredible pressure on the audit doing up front, and quite simply, even bringing everything forward, we don't have the capacity to do that. I think if there was, thinking forward, say going into next year, for example, if there was an end of September committee, was an option, that's something we could look at and see in a date-wise whether that's achievable. Because if we're doing the audit just now in the core field work in September this year, if we're able to deliver that puts us in a clearer position to say, well, actually, we know we can achieve that alongside balancing the priorities across all the other audits. Then next year, making that incremental improvement, may give us scope or capacity to do that. So that's possibly an option, and that's the kind of thing we need to kind of manage through. I think at the moment, though, we haven't gone down that route because I think being realistic, that would be too challenging. And I think we saw last year, and some of the challenges we had on resourcing from our perspective, when we got some gaps and some absences, it gave us a real challenge, even just doing on the November one. We are much better positioned this year overall in terms of the overall time frame, but it's still a big jump to move, certainly to August. But maybe into next year, end of September, is something we could look and see if that's something that could be accommodated in a committee timeframe.
Can I just come back in on that?
Nicole?
Yeah, thanks. So thanks, Stephen. That's very helpful. And again, perhaps it's something. Well, there's two options, I suppose. We again perhaps look at the overall timetable so that going forward we are more aligned with the audit requirements. I know that other organisations sometimes have special one-item meetings alone just to deal with that. So that's maybe something to to consider as well. But also perhaps this is the very example of when perhaps having a subcommittee, a scrutiny committee, who could act on behalf of the wider committee might be helpful. That's the only point I'm going to make on that today.
Yes, thank you very much, Councillor McCall. I think we've already discussed the scrutiny issue, which isn't particularly helpful here. I think Mr. Higgins already confirmed his views on that point in terms of the scrutiny aspect of it. I do absolutely agree with your point that maybe there's an occasion for having a one-off meeting to discuss particular items, and I think that would be very helpful. But again, I think Mr. Higgins already confirmed that going forward, Audit Scotland will hopefully be in that better place in terms of aligning with our cycle rather than us having to align with theirs. But we'll obviously see what the future brings in terms of that. I think returning back to normal timelines.
I think in August. I think the August meeting. I think the August meeting would be too tight, though. I think regardless, I think that's what Stephen O'Hagan has said. So it's maybe either change our meeting cycle to align with the audit cycle, or we think about a one-off meeting in September, once Audit Scotland are back on track and can meet September.
Yeah, I think that's something for the future to consider. Again, it's not something we've had problems with till recent years, so maybe we'll just need to see how things shake out a bit. Councillor Darnell, please.
Yeah, thanks, convener. I don't think we could change the meeting in June because obviously we're going back in the chamber and the chamber's all booked for the 16th. And also, I mean, the school holidays come off on the Friday the 29th. So, I mean, obviously staff might be away on holiday and things. So I don't think we'd be able to change it to the 30th because of that. It'd just be too much upheaval, I think. Thank you.
I think that's a helpful point in terms of the being able to corral everyone into the same place at the same time, given members' diaries and indeed requirements of officers. I think we've given the commitment here that we'll look at what's possible in terms of getting that done, but it does seem like it's going to be very difficult to rearrange dates without giving members and indeed officers sufficient notice. And it may well be that the report being worked on till the last minute, that might be difficult to guarantee. Keith, you wanted to come back on this as well?
Yeah, thanks, convener. Yeah, the point made around a single item committee, I'm sympathetic to. We kind of did that for the accounts relatively recently, as you recall, although we did take the opportunity to tag another report on it at that point. In terms of the scrutiny subcommittee, just remind the joint committee there is a general purposes subcommittee, which in theory could be delegated to carry out that activity. However, the advice from the clerk to the joint committee is that it would be inappropriate to take something with the weight of our annual accounts to a subcommittee, because that was one of the things we were considering when we had to, we were unable to bring the annual accounts to the joint committee in November. We did look at the option of a subcommittee, but the advice from the clerk to the committee was that it should be the full committee. So based on the clerk's advice, I think a subcommittee, whether it's the existing subcommittee that the joint committee can have, or whether it's certain parties' desire for a scrutiny subcommittee, is perhaps not appropriate for that case.
Thanks very much, Keith. Just before I bring in Councillor Duff, I would have to say that I think I've been consistent over the last year in making sure that the Joint Committee has as much say in things as possible, and whether that's workshops with all members invited, or whether indeed, as suggested by Councillor McCall, having a special one-off meeting to discuss this, I do think it's clear that the job of the Joint Committee is to scrutinise Tayside contracts, and it's not the job of being delegated to a subcommittee, and indeed the legal officers agree with that view. I do feel it's more democratic that everyone has the opportunity to comment on any accounts, and indeed all committee business, and I've tried as much as possible to delegate business to other members, but I do think a subcommittee is inappropriate in terms of this business, and that everyone should have the opportunity for a say and a view of the accounts in particular. Councillor Duff, please.
Thanks, Convener. Maybe moving slightly away from this now. In paragraph 32 of the audit plan, which is on page 82 of the pack, it talks about a review of the internal audits in a 2024-25 audit plan to see if there were any areas where the audit team could rely on the work. They concluded there wasn't. I'd wondered if that was just the way things are, or whether some collaboration between internal audit and external audit for the coming year might be helpful when next year's audit comes around. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Duff. I'll bring in Mr. O'Hagan because he's taken his microphone off, so he's clearly willing to back this one. Mr. O'Hagan?
Yeah, I mean, I think just from an external audit perspective, I think we do look to work with internal audit. We have discussions, but we have slightly different remits and focuses. And increasingly over the years, one of the challenges for external audit is that where we do seek to rely on internal audit, there's actually quite a lot of work we need to do to get that reliance. And you kind of get to a balancing point where, is it easier to do the work ourselves, or more efficient? Sorry, not easier, more efficient to do the work ourselves. So we don't have an issue with internal audit in any sense around that. It's just the way the focus has changed, and the focus of internal audit over the years has changed as well from a kind of traditional, very much detailed into some of the systems, and that's where we used to get a lot of that assurance, but they've moved to much more risk-based as well. So we will always seek to take what assurance we can from areas of overlap. But usually it's more about the conversation and the outputs and reports. What can we learn from that, and what can we bring to focus on ours?
Thank you.
Thanks very much. I don't see any further questions on this item. So can item 7 be agreed, please? Thanks very much.
Thank you. That takes us on to item 8, review of performance reporting, and the report before you is to be agreed.
Thank you, Laura. Keith, do you wish to introduce this report, please?
Yeah, thanks, Convener. This report is a fulfilment of a wish from joint committee members identified during a series of engagements we carried out admittedly many months ago. The two key areas that elected members were looking for was a streamlining of reports to joint committee, but also to transpose our performance information onto an online dashboard of key performance indicators. This was also a recommendation of the external review of Tayside contracts back in 2023. So the report covers 4 main elements. One is the establishment of a dashboard, which has been the product of a lot of very positive working and engagement, and I'm very grateful to the working group, Councillors Duff, Shepherd, Roberts, Short, Cuthbert and McCall for all their input into getting where we've got to with the dashboard. We had a little engagement session on Friday, and several members were able to attend, and hopefully you were able to see that the dashboard is viewable anytime. You don't need to wait for reports to come to the joint committee. You can access the dashboard anytime you want. It's highly visual. It's red, amber, green status, charts and graphs rather than I feel like a wall of words. And in many cases, the dashboard has the opportunity to drill down. So things like looking at school meals by, say, primary, secondary or nursery in your own council area. So a lot of advantages to the dashboard. So we're proposing we go forward in terms of the dashboard approach. We're looking to streamline our joint committee reports by having a quarterly performance update. So as officers, we would look to summarise what the key highlights, the areas for attention and any trends that we feel we need to bring to the joint committee members' attention from the dashboard. I think the value of the dashboard is it gives that other level of governance that joint committee members can actually go into the dashboard and look to see, if they choose to do so, if there are any other areas which are of concern to them that we've perhaps not picked up. I think the other important element of this report is that because of moving to this more kind of performance dashboard focus, we can streamline and consolidate several of our reports. Something like 16 reports can be consolidated. And I think there's a strength there because that frees up more joint committee time to look at the actual performance elements and take any issues away to other engagement or development sessions around that one. And the fourth element, and possibly relatively minor in the scheme of things, is to look at the reporting limits for the award of tenders, which hasn't been changed in at least the last 15 years, so doesn't really reflect inflationary increases. So, in my opinion, Convener, I think this is a very significant advancement in performance reporting and governance. It's not the finished article in terms of the dashboard, but certainly we're getting there, and I think it'll be subject to refinement as we go. But I think in terms of taking us to a new era of performance and transparency, I think it's a real step forward, and I would commend the report to you. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, Keith. And I just want to start by echoing your thanks for all elected members that have taken the time to be on that working group. I think it's been a really good piece of work that's been put together. I think it's very worthwhile in terms of giving that scrutiny to Tayside contracts, giving the ability of members to go in and drill into more detail for that. And as you say, freeing up time during our meetings to be able to discuss things in more detail that aren't part of that dashboard. So as I say, very grateful to members that put their time into that and been part of that working group. And I think that's something that's going to be very useful for all elected members going forward. Councillor Short, I can see you've got a question, please.
Yeah, first of all, can I just put it on record how supportive and helpful Galen was?
Yeah.
It really was excellent. So please, if we could give our thanks to him. And the other thing is, Keith, and I probably should have thought about it at the time, but we do really good work within our communities, and we don't necessarily always know that that's happening. So I wonder if there's just an opportunity somewhere to talk about on a dashboard who we've supported, like a sign for somebody who, you know, it happens to be an organisation that we know and we've put forward, and that comes back that they've had something. Because unless we see it tends to be on a quarterly basis or something that we sometimes get that information. So it'd just be quite nice to have a running total of it, if that were at all possible.
If I can answer, Convener, yeah, I take the point you're making, Councillor Shaw. I agree with the point you're making. I'm wondering if it's maybe more appropriate to put that on our website under the communities page, particularly under the community fund, as opposed to on a dashboard. But I do take the point that it would be good to promote and publicise that information. The reason why I'm maybe suggesting a website rather than a dashboard is that the website is open to all, and community groups might go on and see another community group that they know that got funding from or got support from Tayside contracts through our community fund, and they could network. So I think it's more publicly available than the actual dashboard approach. But the principle of what you're suggesting, I'm very supportive of.
See, that was spoken like a true officer. I was thinking of myself standing with a sign and a photograph.
Well, Councillor Short, we can always do them. I know we've had several. I know the convener's been involved in at least one that I recall photo op with a successful recipient of our community fund.
No, thanks very much, Councillor Short and Keith. I totally take the point you're making, Councillor Short, and I do think that we need to use every opportunity to publicise the good works of Tayside Contracts in terms of the community opportunities, the volunteering that staff do, and maybe liaise more with the constituent councils in terms of sharing what we've done. The one that jumps to mind is obviously our apprentices and the awards that they've won nationally and been nominated for nationally. Absolutely fantastic. And if we could share that wider, I'm sure everyone would be in favour of that. Councillor Duncan, you've got a question, please.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Yeah, Keith, you touched upon it partially in your presentation. I know it's proposed to raise the level, excuse me, of reporting tenders awarded from 25 to 50,000 for goods and services. So that's obviously a 50% increase, although I do accept that it hasn't changed for some like 15 years. It then goes on to say, and 100,000 for works. But what is the current level for works? It doesn't say.
Thanks, Councillor Duncan. It was actually a suggestion from the working group because we didn't have that differentiation, and the member officer working group members suggested we actually separate it into these procurement categories because there is a kind of higher bar in terms of procurement legislation for works. So we suggested we kind of split it into the goods and services and work. So it's never had that differentiation before.
That's fine. That's fine. That clarifies that.
Thanks very much, Councillor Duncan. Councillor Lane, you wanted in for a comment, please.
Thanks, Stephen. Yeah, I had time to go along on Friday to the demonstration of the dashboard, and I just wanted to say that it seems to be a good piece of work, and I think everybody should utilise it in a graphic form. It points out, where we're performing really well, where we're performing maybe not so well, and highlights where improvement can be, but also highlights where work is really good. So yeah, thanks for everybody who worked on actually bringing it to fruition, and I think it's a really good piece of work.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for your comments. I don't see any further requests for comment. Oh, Councillor McCall, please.
It was really just a comment. I mean, I really enjoyed working on this piece of work. The only problem is, because of my particular IT setup, I have not been able to access the dashboard. So I will get that resolved as an IT security issue. But I would just encourage everybody on the joint committee to try and access the dashboard, because I think that's the final bit of work that needs to be done to make sure that it works for everybody. And I know there will be others who, like me, have perhaps other public sector responsibilities linked to their councillor work, but they have different email addresses for those, which is part of the problem I have, because I have two. One for NHS Tayside as well as one for Perth and Kinross Council. So that's what's causing the glitch. So I would really encourage everybody to get on board, and if there's any issues, to feed back in to Keith or whoever, if they're having any difficulty accessing the system, because it's only going to be effective if everybody can access it. And I also want to thank the officers for their time and patience as well, answering all the questions and all the suggestions from everybody who was in the working group. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor McCall. I know that from previous issues that the IT at Perth and Kinross must be like a digital Fort Knox, which I'm sure they'll be very pleased with, but it does cause you some issues as well. I've had my own issues with IT, and again, you can only be grateful for that when there are things, but it can be annoying as well not being able to access documents like that. So I'm sure those comments will be taken on board.
Yeah, so I have that squared because I also have NHS Tayside to deal with. So between the two of them, I'm kind of it's a challenge. That's all I can say.
Yeah, I can only imagine that. The different logins for different roles must be frustrating. Councillor Cuthbert, you wanted in as well, please.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. I just really wanted to thank Galen and Keith for the work they've put in on this, and to sort of say that I see this as an iterative process, so that the dashboard is as it is at the moment, but I can see it evolving over time. I have already suggested there's a map on one of the pages that I think everyone knows where Perth and Kinross and Angus and Dundee are. I've suggested that be replaced with cash flow figures, so you can actually see the banking figures. So there's things like that, but I think it's excellent to see this coming forward, and I'm grateful to Galen and Keith for their work.
Thanks so much, Councillor Cuthbert. Sorry about that. Forgot I wasn't on mute. Coughing my way through this meeting. No, I think that's very much appreciated. I think Keith did already give the commitment that obviously, as you say, it's an iterative document and we'll look at changes as we go on, but it's good that we've got it up and running in the first place. Keith, please.
Thanks, convener. Just to confirm two things. One, in terms of access, if you're still having difficulties with access, let myself know and we'll pursue that through. And the second point, yeah, Councillor Cuthbert, yeah, we acknowledge the suggestions you've made that these are progressing. So yeah, and I agree with you. It is an iterative process. I think we've kind of got to the first stage with this, but and you know, I wouldn't like it to be changing all the time, but I think we need to settle to something which meets the needs of the Joint Committee. So happy to make any tweaks going forward. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Keith. I don't see any further requests to speak on this item, so can item 8 be agreed? Thanks very much.
Thank you. That takes us on to item 9, and that is the date of the next meeting. The next meeting will be held on Monday, the 16th of June 2025 at 10 AM in the Town and County Hall, the Cross Forfar, and also held remotely.
Thanks very much. We've already discussed this in previous agenda items, and so those comments notwithstanding, can this be noted in terms of the date? Thanks very much. Moving on, please, Laura.
Okay, so we are now going on to the confidential part of the agenda. Can it be agreed that we exclude press and public for the remaining items?
Is this agreed? Thanks very much.
Okay, and I will also now stop the recording.